You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 542, Course Oblivion.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson, sitting in for Norman Lau, our beloved. Each week on Mission Log, we set a course for the next episode of Star Trek, bravely exploring the morals, meanings, and messages. So nice to be able to say that again. And asking ourselves if it holds up or just turns into dust somewhere out in space.
This week, Course Oblivion, the one where the crew of Voyager are not what they seem and barely miss getting rescued by the crew of Voyager. Dun, dun,
Hey.
dun.
Do you want an Ouroboros? Have we got one
Exactly.
for you this week?
Ashley, I am so excited to welcome you to Mission Log. Thank you so much for sitting in. As you said, our beloved, our dear friend Norman Lau. It's just great to be able to work with you again. And for anybody in our wider Mission Log audience who does not know you, please tell us about yourself.
First of all, it's wild to be here talking about a live-action episode. I pretty much encompass the animated verse of the
And
Star Trek
wonderfully
universe.
so, yes.
It's very on brand, actually. If you don't know me, what have you been doing with your life? I am Ashley Victoria Robinson, multi-hyphenate creator, also based in Los Angeles, alongside John, and honestly, like a whole bunch of people in the larger Mission Log fan
Wonderful
fam.
people out here. Yeah.
I am an actor and I'm an award-losing actor, comic book writer, and podcaster. My podcast is called Geek History Lesson. We teach character histories in a little bit less than an hour, 10 years, 500 episodes. John has been a guest. Please subscribe and listen to it. We have a bunch of Trek episodes. And these days, I'm doing a lot of hosting for Read Pop. If you don't know Read Pop, you know things like New York Comic Con, the RIP Mission Star Trek.
Yeah, well, to be covered on another episode. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They do a bunch of great conventions all over the world. And if you go to them, you might see me hosting on the main stage. So, professional geek, Peter Pan syndrome layabout in LA. is
Fabulous.
who I
That's
am.
why we reach. Yeah, we reach.
I know.
All right. Well, if you would be so kind as to tell people where they can find us, and then I will move right along to trivia.
Yes. So if you want to reach out to Mission Log for any reason, but specifically to tell them how great I was on this episode, you can...
Yes.
Mission Log is, of course, a conversation about Star Trek. If you don't love Star Trek, you're about to. You can find the show at missionlog@roddenberry.com, on X and Facebook at Mission Log Pod, because they're very, very good at branding. While you're at it, a review and rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform makes a huge difference to the podcast that you love. Give us 5 stars and then write whenever you want. Always remember that your comments will be used, could and will, honestly, on Mission Log. So say nice things. The Roddenberry Industrial Complex will not be denied. That's very funny.
We're keeping that line in. Yeah, Adam Pranica wrote that. It's not going anywhere. Hey, before I drop trivia about this episode, actually, I have a question for you. If you could illuminate us with a little bit of trivia of your own, why did you choose this episode? Because I gave you some options, and you said Course Oblivion. Like, not even a second thought.
Okay, first of all, because I did have it was in this chunk of episodes. Which one would you like to do? So that was part of it. Because otherwise we'd probably be here talking about The Visitor if I'm going to really reveal my hand. Truly one of my favorite episodes of Mission Log. The Deep Space Nine stuff.
Yeah.
The discussions, I'm like, ooh, I wish I was there. I would scream right in my friends' faces. But Course Oblivion, first of all, this is a great arc of Voyager. I think Voyager can be sort of a mixed bag with all due love and respect. And this is really good Voyager. And Course Oblivion, as I think I'm going to wind up saying over and over and over again, highlights what I think a core tenet of Star Trek is. Also, I love the wedding. I love the wedding.
All right. Fair enough. Excellent. Well, let me give you a little background on the episode. We have a story by Brian Fuller. And as you may recall, the story for season 4's episode Demon was pitched by science advisor Andre Bormanis. Kenneth Biller then got the teleplay credit for that one. Now, let's fast forward a bit, and it's Brian who thought, whatever happened to the biomimetic clone version of the Voyager crew after we left them on that planet? So he pitched the idea of a follow-up, which excited Ken and Brannon Braga. So they turned the teleplay assignment over to Brian Fuller and Nick Sagan, which makes a lot of sense to put Brian there, of course, sort of his baby. But then you have Nick along for his unique perspective. And in fact, it turns out that Nick did not exactly love the episode Demon. But like the rest of the writers and producers with a hand in this one, he was interested in the idea of taking some potentially dark turns with this version of the crew. Now, it was directed by Anson Williams, and of course a very logical choice there since Anson directed Demon a little less than a year before.
I also just want to add, can you believe that Potsy is such a good director?
Exactly. And it was so glad that he started showing up at Star Trek conventions. Because a double dose. I get my Happy Days dose and a little Star Trek dose right there. That's so cool. And he's a good director.
He's a very good director, yeah.
Now let's meet our guest stars, and, well, I hate to disappoint, but this is one of those very rare episodes where there are no guest stars, unless you want to consider the fact that all of the cast members aren't actually playing their regular characters, which is pretty cool. You know, you go to Memory Alpha and you look up Garrett Wang. It's like Garrett Wang played Harry Kim, but he also played this other dead Harry Kim, and he also played the Silver Goo Harry Kim, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So get to pad out that resume a bit.
From the people who brought you runny noses and runny eyes, here's a ship full of runny everything.
Prologue. We are all cordially invited to a joyous occasion, the wedding of B'Elanna Torres and Tom Paris. Captain Janeway officiates, Harry plays the clarinet, and Seven catches the bouquet, though she's going to need some explanation about the tradition. Everything is perfect, until we see that something a little troubling is happening below deck. The ship's structure is warping, and the rice tossed at the happy couple starts seeping through the floor. Act 1. Yep. Things are looking pretty good on Voyager. The crew's newly enhanced warp drive promises to get them home in just 2 years, and Janeway is busy planning the ship's next move. Meanwhile, Neelix is trying to help Tom plan the perfect honeymoon, but Tom's ideas are less exotic than Neelix would like. He just wants a quiet getaway in 1920s Chicago. But honeymoon planning is cut short when B'Elanna notices something odd in engineering. Voyager is losing molecular cohesion. The crew suspects radiation from the new warp drive might be the culprit, but even shutting it down doesn't stop the problem. As B'Elanna investigates further, she suddenly falls ill, her body showing alarming signs of degradation. Tom rushes her to sickbay, where they discover that others are affected too. Act 2. The doctor diagnoses B'Elanna with acute cellular degradation, and it's spreading fast. What's worse, everything created by Voyager's replicators, in fact, Voyager itself, is also starting to degrade. But Neelix notices that items brought aboard from outside the ship over the last few months aren't affected. Chakotay and Tuvok meticulously retrace Voyager's journey and land on a disturbing theory. They're not the original crew. They are biomimetic duplicates created by the silver blood they encountered on a demon-class planet. Tom comforts B'Elanna in sickbay in her last moments of life, and Chakotay and Tuvok's theory is confirmed when B'Elanna's body dissolves into silver goo. The entire crew, even Voyager itself, is a copy, and now these copies are breaking down. Act 3. Now aware of their true nature, the crew is faced with a dilemma. Janeway, determined to complete the original Voyager's mission, insists on continuing their journey to Earth, but Chakotay believes they should return to the Demon Planet, where they might stop the degradation. The crew is divided. Tom especially struggles with this new reality, mourning B'Elanna's loss while questioning their mission. Despite the objections, Janeway orders the crew to press on, but Chakotay's health begins to fail, forcing Janeway to reconsider. The doctor suggests finding the real Voyager, where an infusion of genetic material from the original crew could slow or stop their own cellular degradation. Janeway doesn't even know where to start looking for the other ship, which could be anywhere at this point, and she doesn't even know if her counterpart would be willing to help. The bridge crew spot a suitable Class Y planet nearby, but their hopes are dashed when a mining ship threatens them, claiming ownership of the planet. Before Janeway can even attempt to communicate with them, the mining ship fires its weapons at Voyager. Act 4. The mining ship continues firing despite Janeway's pleas, and while the Class Y planet may be their only hope, Janeway refuses to fire back and destroy the other ship, choosing instead to retreat and resume course for Earth. There's a sense of defeat on the bridge, and Tom's continued snarky attitude draws attention from Chakotay. Privately, Chakotay lets Janeway know that he and others back her decision, but many in the crew are getting restless, frustrated. They need to find a place to stop, a place that can be home, but that isn't Earth. Chakotay's condition worsens, and he dies in sickbay. Janeway, now considerably more reflective, returns to the bridge to give the command to set course for the demon planet from which they originated. Act 5. Voyager is falling apart faster than they can manage. Systems fail, the crew continues to die, and their chance of survival dwindles. Janeway, barely holding on, orders a time capsule to preserve their memories and experiences. The ship's deflector fails, life support starts to go, and finally, Janeway succumbs. Now in command, Harry does everything he can with a greatly diminished crew to make it to the demon planet. He detects the real Voyager some 22 light-years away and tries to make contact, but their systems are too far gone. Voyager's duplicate falls apart, and their time capsule is destroyed, erasing all evidence of their existence. The real Voyager arrives just in time to find nothing. Just the atomized traces of deuterium, antineutrinos, and dichromates. Janeway logs the encounter, and the crew continue their course, oblivious to the tragic journey of the other starship Voyager. The end.
We love a bottle episode.
We do, don't we? There's something really special about the creativity of just having your own cast, just having your existing sets. Like, yeah, we get the mining ship, we got, but wow. Yeah, they can really heighten drama when they choose an oddly creative choice like this. So.
Exactly. And I think it, and this I think alludes to some of the stuff that we talked about that's over on the Patreon.
Yeah.
If your concept and your script is solid, everything else could just fall into place. And I think this episode really, really illustrates it.
We might be tipping our hand here about how we feel. All right. Well, let's start at the beginning. I love a good clarinet highlight piece. We get to see Harry back on it, going full Benny Goodman. He's lovely. And I love the funny bit about throwing the rice and the doctor having to explain that we're not making a dish here. And I love the return of the doctor's gigantic camera.
Just the idea that somebody, like some alien, is just crunching on a bunch of uncooked rice is horrible. As a band nerd, anytime we put respect on a woodwind, I'm like, yes. And that's something that I think we forget about Harry, because Riker is so associated with the trombone, and I think the Harry clarinet of it all kind of gets forgotten, and it's really nicely used here in the world's smallest wedding of all time. But man, that camera is ugly. It's so ugly.
I know that you're such a huge DS9 fan, and one thing that I always love about DS9 is just how we get to fill out the space. There are always people moving around, always aliens coming and going, and with the budget cuts on Voyager, it's so disappointing that here's a ship with 140 plus people, and we only ever see about 10 of them.
It reminds me of when you go to like a backyard wedding, and no matter how cute it is and you're just like, we're just us standing in like 600 feet of grass.
Yeah, right, exactly. Let me ask you, did you feel like things were tipped off a little bit? And maybe this is my perception going into the episode, knowing what we're getting. Did things look a little different? Like, to me, hairstyles looked a little different. Like, B'Elanna's hair was a little lighter color.
Okay, was it because I was like, I have really good wigdar being a drag fan, and I was like, that's a different wig.
Yeah.
Again, it's a little more like red strawberry blonde, and the front of it is so nice wigs have lace front. cheaper wigs have hard fronts, and this is a hard front, which to me says that the costuming and that people were like, well, she's gonna die real early in the show.
Okay.
So maybe because this was the wig that they were going to be using with prosthetics, they used different. But yes, from jump, before I was like, what actually happens to these people? I was like, the hair is different, and the dress uniforms are also. Like they're not quite the normal dress uniforms.
Oh,
so
interesting. I
think they're again they were like, how can we take what we're used to seeing, change it a little bit?
Yeah.
So it's pulled from someone's memory, but not rendered quite properly, which is a sort of a theme that I think we're going to see throughout the episode.
I even thought like Tom's hair, it looked a little bit darker and a little more kind of brushed in front of his forehead, like just subtle things. And it could just be me projecting a little bit, knowing like, ooh, what are they changing? I'm looking for changes. Yeah. But it felt just a little bit different, you know?
If it's intentional, it's really well done because it's very, very subtle. But like, if you're people like us who are watching it 3 times like this, it's nice to be like, you can see it.
Right. It's funny. You're talking about things coming from memory, and I'm just, I'm picturing this silver goo, never experiencing sentience before. And some of that silver goo is like, I get to be the captain. I get to be the engineer. I get to be this cool Borg lady. And then some other silver goo is like, I am a dress uniform hanging in a closet that nobody remembers.
Some of the silver goo is Harper and the baby that we never see.
We've never met.
Like, I have so many. Like, there were multiple points where I was like, you should be panicked about the newborn baby on this shit.
Okay, we just had an episode where Harry got in trouble for having sex with an alien woman, and now apparently there's a whole thing where there's like another baby being born on Voyager, and we're never going to meet them. That's tragic.
Because they arguably, maybe, you know what? Maybe we never meet Harper and the baby because they only exist in the goo. Or maybe Harper and the baby or maybe Harper's a character who like died off screen in a red shirt kind of way in a previous mission and no longer exists on Voyager, but like exists in the memory of these people. Like that's how I'm sort of retcon justifying it, because I was like, we should have seen the baby.
That because I mean, for that to be a throwaway line that again it indicates like, hey, this is different, but we're not spelling out how it's different. That was an interesting choice, and I think it's been about 9 months since the split. Yeah. 9 or 10 months. So, that was an interesting thing. Like the idea of a honeymoon that you get to choose the time that you're visiting. You know?
Yes, that would be something that a holodeck would sort of uniquely provide you. Like if John and I go to Chicago on our honeymoon, we're going to 2024 Chicago, but like, 1920 Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty cool. Which I don't know if it takes the excitement out of it. Like when you have a holodeck, you can go anywhere at any time. So what would make the honeymoon more special? Well, the honeymoon is special, based on who you're with and the context and all. But you can just go, like, you could go to 1920 Chicago next week. You could just do that. You know?
I do think the vows are genuinely lovely.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're supposed to have written their own vows, and it's a mostly human. Like, they make the joke about, like, forgoing some of the Klingon rites and constructs of a wedding, which again, if you've watched Deep Space Nine, we kind of do all that there. So I understand why we're like, we're not 3D printing the candles anymore. Okay, it's fine.
Right.
But I thought that their vows were like, there's a couple speeches in here where I'm like, I'm genuinely moved by this. Like, this is very nice writing, very nice performances.
Yeah. Well, and look, I don't want to move too fast, but speaking about genuinely good performances and genuinely good moments, we go from this nice wedding and then into Act 2, you've got Tom losing B'Elanna, and
amazing.
My God, what a strong scene. There are so many episodes where poor Roxanne just, has to emote from laying on a sickbay bed.
Yeah.
But for as many bad things as we have said about the portrayal of Tom Paris and how like they've tried to grow him and give him some maturity, and then they backtrack and just make him awful.
but John, he's so hot, it doesn't matter. That's kind of the Tom Paris quadrivial. They're like, but he looks like a surfer. Like, of course he's kind of a jerk.
That's the excuse, right? It was a lovely scene. It was really played well.
We know all these Legion stories about people who played spouses or romantic interests who actually hated each other's guts on set, and I really get the sense, and obviously from the stories they've told in their sort of ongoing like working friendship and relationship, that they actually really liked each other, and that really comes through. And then when you get moments where the doctor has to say like, but I need to examine her body, and like you watch him on board of that, like, and that's good. That's also just good like sci-fi and science writing. And I think this episode is a good reminder that like there is science and science fiction, and characters like Janeway and the doctor at their core are scientists, and anytime we get to see them be scientists and not be like kind of any other role that they need to fulfill, I'm having a great time watching them.
Oh, agreed so much. I kind of wondered why the death of Milana was not the end of the act. Why you wouldn't use that as the cliffhanger? But okay, talking about our science and
Okay. Just because I saw your note in the show notes.
Okay,
about that.
Of course.
I've been thinking about it. And I think, like your theory about the little tweaks in the opener, I think it's subtly letting us know as audience members, like, it's not the real B'Elanna.
Don't get attached.
Because if it was, the whole episode would have been about her death and the aftermath, and she dies, and then we kind of like shunt that story away. And then even Tom sticks around for a couple more acts, but then Tom also kind of gets shunted away at like the half 3/4 mark, because just because you had mentioned that, I was like, I'm gonna think about it. That's my conspiracy theory.
But honestly, it's such a good cliffhanger to end the act when Tuvok says none of us are real, and that's okay. That is a cool way to do it. So
no matter if it's the best episode of Voyager or the worst episode of Voyager, and contenders for both categories are Legion.
Sure,
Tim Russ will show up to remind you that Tuvok is the best character on the show. And like, I think Tuvok might have 6 lines in this whole episode, and that delivery, like, just every time you're like, man, Tuvok's the best.
He nails them all. He's the best Vulcan. He truly is.
Absolutely.
And, he's just, anytime you give him anything in this show, like you said, even if it's just a handful of lines, even if it's just something that is directly exposition,
as often is.
As it often is, he absolutely nails it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how the crew adjust to this news, and Janeway's...
Not well! Spoiler alert!
Janeway's decision to say, like, I'll go explain it. I mean... Yeah.
It's such a tough call, because if you put yourself in their position, as we often like to do with genre, and specifically Star Trek, to be like, well, how would I deal with this? Like, it is absolutely the correct and respectful thing to do as the leader of this organization, of the ship, and what we've seen become a family is to let them know. But like, there's definitely an argument to be like, well, what if we just didn't tell them and just kind of tried to like carry on, because that's kind of the track that Janeway takes, is like, nope, we're Voyager, we're just as good as Voyager, we're going to do what Voyager is supposed to do, until that crisis moment where, jumping a little bit ahead, her point of view kind of changes on that. And they use this as an excuse to, I think, to your point, kind of regress Tom a little bit, to be like, why am I even going to listen to you? Why does any of this matter? But it's also hard to be like, I don't know, I think I would have been that person to be like, you're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you. Nothing matters.
Right. Well, and I love that line when Harry tries to calm him down as his buddy, and he says something, blah, 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 Tom. And then Tom says, there's no one here by that name. I mean, it's...
Man, like, Harry Kim gets a lot of guff for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of valid criticisms to be made of that character and of how he's treated sort of within the larger... I had like a joke at the beginning where at the wedding, Janeway's like, well, ensign. And I was like, just the forever reminder that he's forever ensign, Harry Kim.
Yes.
But when you get to see him display like such emotional intelligence in usually through his relationship with Tom, it's a really nice moment. And the scene that it comes off of, where Janeway is sort of elucidating the situation, I think that scene is the thesis of the whole episode.
Yeah.
Because it does 2 things, where it's telling you like, hey, they have all the memories and they have all the lived experiences of these characters. So everything you've seen from the wedding to Seven's conversation with B'Elanna, like all of that actually matters and is real, because these are as real a version, goo version of the characters that we know and love. But it does what, like, in my opinion, is the crux of Star Trek, where it presents us with an ethical and moral quandary through the lens of, like, and the ship might explode.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of episodes that don't, like, it does this in a very on-the-nose way, but I just think that scene is so elegant, and again, like, so well acted, and then Harry and Tom's argument is so well acted, where I'm like, damn, this is a really talented cast.
Oh, it's perfect, yeah. Well, okay, let's talk about another character who I feel like is very often wasted. Friend of the show, Holly Amos, always says Chakotay is useless. You don't need him there. And I agree, he is not written very well a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Fake Chakotay, Goo Chakotay, gets to do what Chakotay is supposed to do. And he's supposed to confront the captain when she is making a bad decision, or potentially bad decision.
Behold the primordial soup.
Yes. She doesn't take it well, but I love that he stands up and says, no, this is what you're doing. This is how your crew is reacting. It is my obligation to tell you this. And I want to see more of that from real Chakotay.
I agree, because it's a difficult thing. Like, sometimes I think the pilot episode, the first 2 episodes of Voyager, are top tier, like amazing episodes. Yeah. But you do have to have them as a united crew by the end of it. And so we gloss over a lot of storytelling that I think would have been more interesting if we dragged it out over the course of the first season.
Yeah.
And this kind of returns to that dynamic also, when you consider, like, she's coming at it from a Federation point of view, and he's coming at it from a Maquis point of view. And there are several scenes, including the dinner scene, which honestly felt like a date. And, like, I don't not ship Janeway.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's fair.
I kind of liked her arranging the flowers. I thought it was cute. There are several scenes where we get to see, yes, like you said, a return to that dynamic, and you're like, more of this, please.
Yeah.
And, like, less of the Irish Village, which I refuse to learn the name of.
But you know, honestly, they in that one scene, they play the extremes very well. Like that. Yes. That is it's a scene with utility, but it is also a scene that explores the characters really nicely.
And they feel like the characters that we know and love, and they don't feel like. There's a version with lesser actors where they feel like caricatures, and that's absolutely not what is happening in that scene.
Right. Did you notice the tears in Janeway's eyes?
I just liked, like, man, like, also, not for nothing, but, like, Kate Mulgrew is a stone cold hottie with this haircut.
Yes.
Janeway, 100%. Like, I love a sensible bob. If you can see the video, you understand. And just, like, man, like, she really, because we've had we've had some very heightened versions of Janeway where I'm not going to say the performance feels disingenuous, but, like, the reasons for the performance feel disingenuous. We also get really camp versions of her in our Captain Proton universe, which we also love.
Of course.
And it's just really nice to see her just have feelings. Because Janeway's not a super, super emotional character, even as a female character. Yeah. They write her off with very masculine traits. And I think they really earned that. And again, if this were like a CW, like an Arrowverse show, and I say that with love, I love the Arrowverse, she would be, like, weeping and rending her garments. But all you need is just that little glint, and props to the lighting and the director for catching that. And you're like, oh, things are really bad.
Well, when you can do something really like that, and as I always say on the show, when you can show and not tell, and that is exactly a moment, and it carries on for actually a bit of time. You just catch that in her eyes, and you go, wow, this is serious. The moment is real for her.
It must have been exhausting to film, because to remain in that heightened state for hours and hours and hours and hours must have been so draining, honestly.
Absolutely. I gotta say, when we catch up with our crew at the tail end of the show, not the real crew, but our Goo crew, the Goo crew, you get T-shirts to say Goo crew.
Absolutely.
The makeup is really gross and wonderful, and
makeup and the effects have been. Especially, again, for a 90s television show, we know they had, like, budget issues. Really, they used it to the best of their abilities. Janeway looks creepy the whole time.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I thought that was very cool, very well done. There's something about the time capsule. We'll get to this in the next segment. There's something about the time capsule that is just so tragic, the way they handle it. Brilliant idea. Absolutely great idea. Makes sense in character. I asked you something offline that now I want to share with the audience in the show here, which is, okay, when we see the atomized remains of the goo Voyager, there were things on board that were not goo, because that's how they discover it, by analyzing the things that they had picked up over the last 9 or 10 months.
Science!
Would Voyager not have picked up, like, okay, there's a bunch of deuterium goo, but there's also a plant and a thing and some other thing just floating out here. Should we stop and look for a while?
Yeah, I mean, like, thank
not.
goodness the kale survived.
Yeah.
Because that's enough to feed legions, as we know.
Big basket of kale, exactly.
I mean, ultimately, that's a storytelling device, right? Because they would, right? Like, the Voyager sensors
Yes.
would absolutely have recognized at least those three. And if they found 3 items in that limited time, there's got to be more things aboard the goo ship that...
Right.
Are authentic, I guess, or carbon-based, or however you want to think about it. But if you do that, and then you have Tuvok and Janeway open the science bag back up, then we have to discover whether or not what that means, and they got to go. Yeah. They got to get home.
Of course, yeah. I mean, there'd be no way to know what the story was. They would just be like, wow, there's weird stuff here. Oh, and that goo kind of looks like the stuff we found 10 months ago.
Exactly.
Speaking of tragic goo endings, Harry Kim gets to be captain again. Instant Harry Kim.
Love it.
But not long of this world, tragically.
And again, Garrett Wang, amazing performance, absolutely slays in those. Anytime we get Harry Kim to do anything, 1, utilitarian, or 2, of rank, we love, we stand. We are absolutely here. Like, it's a great moment. It's a better choice than Neelix as the chief medical officer. I can tell you that much, because Neelix as the chief medical officer was a terrible idea.
Yes, that does not fill me with confidence.
I also really like the sort of mantra of what would Captain Janeway have done, and the fact that we don't have that as merch is criminal.
Oh, somebody make that happen, please.
Like the what would Jesus do? What
WWCJD. Yes.
I'll buy it. I'll buy the first one. That is very merchable. And I just really liked that, because it speaks to their respect of their version of Janeway. And not to skip so many decades in the future, but that's also a thread that's carried throughout Prodigy, which is something, what would Captain Janeway do is a very common thread now in contemporary Star Trek.
All right, designers, get on that.
Maintaining some liquid assets may be a good idea, but this crew took it too far.
We'll get right back to Course Oblivion after a word from this week's sponsor.
John, using Netflix without ExpressVPN is like getting tickets to a huge concert, like, what are the kids listening to now? Taylor Swift.
Or, wait, hear me out. How about Jeff Lynne's ELO Over and Out tour?
Okay, I can probably relate to that one just a little bit better. But it's like getting tickets and only being allowed to watch the warm-up act. Then you get kicked out. I mean, sure, it's something, but it's not the full experience, right?
That is definitely not the whole thing. Although the opening band was good, I'll give them that. It's as if you traveled all the way to Risa, but then you were only allowed to hang out in the spaceport. That defeats the whole purpose. What's the point? With all the streaming platforms, they actually hide content based on your location, so guess what? You're not getting the whole library.
Yeah, let me tell you from personal experience, Jamaharan does not happen at the spaceport. But maybe not that, but this is where ExpressVPN beams in to save the day. It lets you change your online location so you get to choose where Netflix thinks you're watching from. They've got servers in over 100 countries, which means thousands of new shows at your fingertips. And it's not just Netflix. You can unlock content on Disney+, BBC iPlayer, and more.
And the very best part, it's ridiculously easy to use. Open up the app, pick a location, hit connect, and you are done. You don't even need to reverse the polarity.
Wow, how could I ever get used to that? ExpressVPN works on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, smart TVs, you name it. And it's got blazing fast speed, so you can stream in HD without the dreaded buffering circle of doom.
Nobody wants that. All right, so I recently used ExpressVPN to watch a documentary The Saint steps in to TV on Netflix France. And yes, when I say The Saint, I mean Roger Moore's The Saint. Yes, documentary made in 2008 featuring Sir Raj and a lot of people who worked on the show. You can't get it in the US. So all I had to do was open up ExpressVPN, select France, tap one button to connect, refresh Netflix. There it was. Boom. Super smooth, just like Sir Roger himself. Earl, what have you been watching?
First off, I was just adding that to my watch list. I'll give you an example of, I'm a big fan of BBC iPlayer. They get stuff, especially Doctor Who fans out there, you get stuff on iPlayer that does not happen here. The Tales of the TARDIS didn't get shown over here. They were only for, the license fee payers in the UK. And if you log into iPlayer with a VPN. Just the other day, John, they had a full BBC orchestra and choral concert of Doctor Who music, hosted by Catherine Tate, that they recorded, that will be shown on iPlayer later in the year. We're not going to get that here.
Oh, man. Okay, that's good. Yeah, and I love using ExpressVPN to connect to some British classics as well, BBC iPlayer and elsewhere. It's a game changer for sure. There's no more geo-block standing between me and my favorite episodes. And, it's also keeping all of your data secure at the same time with that encrypted tunnel. So it's like having a personal force field around your online activity.
Absolutely. So be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services, but only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/missionlog. Don't forget to use our link at expressvpn.com/missionlog to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
So, Ashley, in the last segment, you brought up an idea that I really is just the heart of this episode. And that is the idea that these characters, these goo characters that we get to know, they're as they say, they're the summation of the memories and the experiences of the real Voyager crew. And because they are the summation of those memories and experiences, they're driven by the same kinds of principles and values and morals and ideals that those people had. And I love this. I love this train of thought because it opens up this whole existential question. You and I, as far as I know, we are not made of goo. We are our actual carbon-based selves talking to each other.
Oh, there's some carbon goo in there, but yes,
sure. But it gets to the heart of this. What makes you you? Why are you? And if you go with the premise of this episode, it's just memory and experience. That's what it is. And the underlying biology may not actually matter. And that is a weird place to be, because if I came to you and I said, Ashley Victoria Robinson, if you could upload your consciousness to a computer, say, would that be you? And you would say, well, no, it's not me because I'm me. But if I switched on that computer and it didn't know the difference, then where does that leave us? It leaves us with two of you, one that just happens to be silicon-based and one that happens to be carbon-based.
And then my timeline does a lie.
Yes.
And there are infinite possibilities on what could happen.
Right.
Identity politics, I think, are really at the core of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Spock being, again, one of the most clear examples of that. And that's what this is. It's like grappling with the idea of what is your identity and where does it begin and end? And it touches on nature versus nurture throughout this episode. But as a human person of this earth, I learned...
Allegedly,
so-called, through conjecture. In the last, I don't know, maybe a decade ago, that every time you remember, whenever you have a memory, or whenever you tell a story and you remember something, you're only remembering the last time you remembered it.
Yeah.
So your memory is just a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, which is an idea that I find deeply distressing. But if that is all that our human identities are, then we are more or less whole on a whole than our beloved goo bots, our goo characters. because they're living the same thing. And frankly, if I were watching this as if it was a contemporary episode of like New Trek, as we lazily call it, I would be like, this is a spinoff. They're absolutely spinning off these goo characters. We're gonna go back to the plot, like, because it does kind of leave it, even though obviously we see them sent out into the yonder void or whatever.
Yeah.
There's the possibility that we could see like more return to goo humanoids, or like this would absolutely be a thread this would feel like a setup episode. It would be something that we would tug on in the future. And I think it's such a big question that the episode ultimately comes down on, like, yes, they are as real and valid. And then they obviously come up with a story reason to not have these actors get 2 character payments for each episode, right, because then your budget would truly explode.
Right.
But it really does leave you, it's a real head scratcher, which I think is Trek at its best.
It is. Well, Janeway has this great line. She says, if everything about us was duplicated, that includes our memory engrams, fast forward a little bit. So if you feel something, remember something, believe something, I'm not about to tell you it's not real. And I love that idea, just psychologically, that you can have an experience, and the experience is real regardless whatever the actual cause of the experience may have been. And that is a fascinating psychological thread to pull on. But the other thing that you said a moment ago, nature versus nurture, there may be something just inherent in the fact that they are silver goo that has a very short lifespan, or let's say they stayed on the demon planet where conditions were ripe for them to just continue as they were. There might be something entirely different in their set of experiences because maybe they have a kind of immortality. Maybe they just kind of return to the goo, and the goo reemerges again every time it comes into contact with something else.
Those are just changelings, John.
Yeah. Oh, wait, we had a whole series about them. Yeah, that's very
you
true.
bring up such an interesting point in that, and I think the only character that they kind of dare to examine that distillation with is our much beloved and much maligned Tom Paris, because maybe goo Tom Paris was always going to kind of return to his more dickish qualities because there's just something in his lived experience as goo Tom Paris, or that's inherent in being a demon planet based life form.
Right. Whereas
the Tom Paris that we know from the main series obviously goes on to continue to change, and I would say he illustrates growth definitely by the end of the series. And in 47 minutes, I get that you can't do that with every single version of the characters that we know, but I think they definitely kick the door open on that. Maybe they don't wrap it up in a satisfying way, but that's also the sort of eternal discussion in psychology and in our health system, is like, well, are we nature? Were you always going to be like this unless you suffered a childhood trauma, or is it because you suffered a childhood trauma that you're like this now? Naming no Ashleys or anything.
But interesting that he's the one who has the existential crisis, whereas the opposite side of that is Harry, who's just like, no, I'm me. And the captain is still the captain, and none of that changes. Like I can't.
And Harry is the one who winds up leading them into ultimately their end, but with as much grace, I think, as humanly possible.
Yes, or as ghouly possible.
As ghouly possible.
Yeah. I want to switch gears just for a second here, because I mentioned the time capsule, and there's something so heartbreakingly tragic about this, because it's not just this one crew. By the way, we don't know what the time capsule was made of. So even if they launched
probably goo.
Probably goo. Like, sorry, guys, just a goo capsule now. But they tried. And it's just so, it speaks to a very human thing to want to be able to leave a mark, whatever it is. What you and I are doing now, this
I was going to say that.
It will exist. Somebody can watch it or listen to it long after we're gone. It's just a thing that exists, and hopefully will carry on. There will be a playback mechanism, I hope, in 150, 200 years, whenever. But it really hits home. And even though we're watching these goo aliens that we have no real connection with, we get the feeling, like we get that impetus, and then we really feel it, at least I really feel it, when it's just it's just gone. It's just a puff of smoke now.
It honestly feels like a very un-Star Trek thing to do, because Star Trek is so hopeful.
Right.
again, if this were new Trek because of the brand synergy and spinoffs and all that, time capsule would have survived, and we would have opened up the possibility. Maybe we'll see this in Prodigy. Maybe we'll see this in Lower Decks. Maybe we'll see this in Section 31. I don't know, whatever. But just to wipe them, it's really sad. It's really sad. It reminds me of I can't think of the Voyager episode name, but it's the one with the astronaut from the 20th century who gets flung forward.
Yes. We haven't gotten there yet, and we dare not jump the timeline, but I've seen it.
Mild, and I won't spoil what happens,
I quite like it. Yeah.
There is a sense of finality in that's echoed here. And you're like, we're usually like, well, but it's okay because we will befriend the Klingons someday. It's okay because Bajor will survive.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and then it's over.
Yeah.
It's so, like, because the minute the time capsule doesn't survive, you kind of know what's coming in the next 7 minutes or so.
Right.
You know, nobody's making it out of here. But it's an uncharacteristically dark turn, I would say, for Trek as a whole.
Yeah. And it makes me feel bad for the silver goo, which is we had a discussion about this a few weeks ago where we're talking about the giant space amoeba that was eating ships.
I recall this.
Okay, right. And the argument was, okay, on the one side, here's the doctor saying, well, I can't tell that it's sentient, but we're not going to hurt it. And here's Captain Ahab, Katai, played by William Morgan Shepherd, saying, it is sentient, I want to destroy it. And silver goo is this really interesting sci-fi conceit that even they are aware we had no sentience until we were in touch with this sentient species that gave us life. And I love Chakotay saying, like, what good is sentience if you're not alive to experience it? So
good. Also, the goo is a very Roddenberry thing. He loved a big amorphous like at its core, it's like that's a real TOS concept, is the fact that they're just goo,
right
to begin with. But the grappling with the idea of being non-sentient or sort of lesser sentient at best goo, it's like how you can't get mad at a bug. Like a mosquito is annoying, but it's like just being a mosquito, so you can only be so mad at them. So it's like, well, how upset can the goo be because they're just goo? Like, we also have to presume that even though they're no longer, that they've deteriorated to a state, maybe they haven't died. Maybe they will reform and they will eventually go and become goo on a demon-class asteroid somewhere.
I wondered about that. I wondered if there would be a quote-unquote life for that stuff again. But again, like, I do I feel bad for it? Because when it's just goo, it's just goo. Like, it doesn't have sentience or consciousness or purpose or anything like that. It only quote-unquote exists when it comes into contact with something that already has that quality of sentience and consciousness.
Very egotistical take on the value of being a human being, I have to say.
Yeah, sure.
But I do
Guilty.
think we're... Yeah, right. Because it's a piece of narrative storytelling. Like, we are meant to feel bad for them, but not so bad that we're like, "Hey, are you ever going to go back and see them again?" Like, I think we're supposed to find like a sense of peace that, like, well, but it's okay. They didn't know they was alive before,
right?
If you ever feel like your enthusiasm is draining away drip by drip, according to this show, it might not just be your enthusiasm.
Well, as best we know, we are still the carbon-based life forms that you know as Ashley and John, and we will do what we always do, maybe, unless this is just the memory of some other being who did this before, which is we get to the end of an episode of Mission Log, and we like to look back in summation at the episode of Star Trek, and we ask ourselves if the episode holds up, and we ask ourselves if we learned something, a moral, a meaning, or a message to take home with us. So, Ashley, here at the end of course Oblivion, I pose it to you, does the episode hold up? And our purposely vaguely worded question. It is up to your interpretation.
It's so funny. If you and I do turn into goo by the end of this, this will be, I'm not going to lie, the most iconic episode of Mission Log.
It truly will.
TLDR, yes, of course, that's why I picked it.
There we
but
go.
just like the first time I watched this episode when I was a preteen, I absolutely loved it. I was like, I had a great time watching this. It's such a cool way to do a bottle episode. Like we talked about, no extra sets, no guest stars, just a cool old-fashioned space mystery with these iconic characters that we've built this emotional attachment to through previous seasons. And by this point in the series, like we've seen the crew of Voyager go through a lot of the Trek tropes, a lot of the ones that we love and that we maybe don't love so much. And to focus on just the thought experiment at the core of the franchise, I think makes this a really, really clever episode, because it could have just been they're goo. So what? Isn't that hilarious?
Right.
I also believe that this episode is a great episode that you could share with a potential new fan for the first time, because you get a quick beat with all the main characters and a nice distillation of all of their personalities and their interactions and their interpersonal relationships. The stakes are really, really high throughout. But if you don't know anything, I think you'll get a sense of what Star Trek is really broadly, and then what Voyager is specifically. So, like, I had a great viewing experience.
That's really I would not have thought of this as an entry point to Star Trek. But
it's not the cleanest one. But
it isn't. But it honestly it gives you a thumbnail view of who the characters are and what the mission is and what their values are. So that's a very cool take on it. Yeah, I mean,
thank you.
Hard agree. I was really surprised at how much I appreciated watching this again. So if I recall correctly, and it's been a while since I did a Voyager watch through, which is why it's fun with Mission Log to rediscover the show. Yeah. But if I recall, I had either not seen Demon, or maybe I just kind of forgotten Demon, whatever it was. So I watched this and I thought, well, this is just kind of a cool, weird Twilight Zone sort of story. And it holds up like that. It holds up as just a weird thought experiment, a weird sci-fi pretense, you know? But it's even better coming a year after Demon, 10 months after Demon, right? That's a cool bit of keeping the canon together, tying these story threads together, exploring something that you felt like, well, we're never going to see that again. And then you do, in a clever way. So it's a cool surprise for the audience at the time. It's a cool surprise for me getting to rewatch it. And here's what I love. So I am a big Twilight Zone fan, and I think about certain episodes of that show that just rely on a twist. And sometimes it's really satisfying. And other times those stories overstay their welcome, because you figure out the twist and you just go like, okay, now I've got to kill half an hour just waiting for the characters to figure it out too, you know? But in the best tradition of those Twilight Zone type stories, this episode of Voyager, it gives away the twist early, but then you stick around longer and you get to really feel the emotion, the heart of what's going on. And you get to empathize with these characters and watch how they stick to their principles based on their real, quote unquote. And look, I think it's a very interesting discussion to figure out who actually is real here. I know that they keep saying the real Voyager, and I'm like, you're real too.
Yeah.
You emerged in an unconventional way, but you're real, you know? So I love it. And if you're a real nerd about these things because you're listening to us,
exactly.
you know, I love the playback value of the episode too, because that's what worried me watching it for the first time, was like, oh, okay, well, once you get the twist, what more is there? Oh, no. There's so much more. There's the story, there's the emotion, there's the character arc, but there's also the little tells of the things that are just slightly off. We talked about wigs earlier. There's Tom's rank. Remember Tom's rank? He's been demoted, but in this reality, he's still lieutenant. And then there's mention of alien species that we've never seen, experiences we've not had, and we just go like, well, wait a minute, why is this...
Babies we've never heard of.
I gotta know. So yes, it holds up remarkably well. It's just a cool idea executed in a very cool but very thoughtful and emotional and genuine way. So I love it when science fiction can do that, give you the high concept, but they just make it a human story. So morals, meanings, messages. I feel like we talked about a lot of cool stuff in the last segment. I look forward to our listeners chewing on this and then coming back and talking to us about what they got out of it too.
Well, the comments are going to be incredible.
Yes.
I'm going to be reading all of the threads.
Yes. But I'll land on this because it's what we talked about, the kind of the crux of what we talked about in the last segment. Our memories make us who we are, but more importantly, our principles make us who we are. So even if you are Silver Goo Janeway, those principles of command and of protecting your crew and adherence to the mission, all those things matter. They actually have weight. They matter. And another important thing here, a little lesson that Goo Janeway learns here, which you might be able to extrapolate over to the real Janeway, it's okay to change your decision when the circumstances call for it. So that's a nice little arc to see in her. What about you, Ashley?
I think my take is largely the same as yours, that our memories are ultimately all that we have, what's happening between your ears, which in honestly a space that's mostly a bunch of goo and electricity. Right. It's the only truth that we have, and it's the only truth that matters at the end of the day. Working together is a core value, and no matter what happens, your humanity, for lack of a better, goo-humanity, and your goodness will remain intact if you're true to who you are. And I think that's powerful, and I think it can be freeing, right? And the idea that like nothing matters can be freeing, because all you have is what's happening right now. You can either be nihilistic about it, or you can be like, oh, and so it's all going to be okay because I know who I am, and that's all I need.
Oh, that's really nicely said, and I appreciate your electric goo working overtime to land on that.
I'm here for goo representation.
And Goomanity, I think, definitely needs to be on a t-shirt as well.
Absolutely.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
Ooh, and you know what's coming up on the next Mission Log? I almost picked this. The fight.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. They missed a golden opportunity for a hit single from this episode, I'll Stop the Ship and Melt With You. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.